Welcome to this explainer, right? Let's go ahead and put on our industry executive hats for a minute because we're traveling back to the spring of 1970 to look at a truly fascinating case study. We're talking about a highly improbable chart upset. It's one of those wild moments in music history where all the conventional data, the established market trends, and literally all the predictable forecasting models were just completely thrown out the window. If you're in the business of understanding audience behavior, forecasting trends, or honestly just appreciating a monumental underdog story, well, you're in for a treat. This is a masterclass in market unpredictability. We are going to break down the anatomy of a true chart anomaly and figure out exactly how an established industry giant got completely sidelined by the most unlikely of challengers. To really wrap our heads around this upset, we've got to look at the key players. The cowboy who conquered the Beatles. I mean, what a phrase, right? But that dramatic phrasing perfectly captures the sheer David versus Goliath rivalry we're unpacking today. You know, in any industry, but especially in music, you've got these immovable objects, titans who dictate the trends and basically monopolize the top spots. And the Beatles, they were the ultimate Goliath, a literal cultural force of nature. And yet, what we have here is a cowboy, a complete outsider, stepping in and conquering them. Framing this as a rivalry isn't just to make it sound cool. It's absolutely essential for understanding the sheer scale of the upset because it completely redefines everything we think we know about competitive dominance. So we have to ask ourselves this absolutely crucial question. How does a rugged actor block the final Beatles single? Just let that sink in for a second. We aren't talking about a rival pop band with a slick multi-million-dollar marketing campaign here. We're talking about a rugged movie actor, a guy whose primary skill set and public persona had absolutely zero to do with topping the pop charts. The whole industry machine was built to produce, promote, and protect pop hits, right? So how on earth does someone operating entirely outside of that massive machinery block what was arguably the single most anticipated music release of its era? Well, that's the mystery we're decoding today. Just look at the staggering contrast here between our two competitors. It's kind of wild. In the left corner, you have Lee Marvin, a guy famous for his gravelly, deep voice and tough guy movie roles, stepping into the music ring with a track called Wandering Star, a song that features, of all things, a Western yodel. And then, in the right corner, you have the undisputed kings of pop, the Beatles, armed with Let It Be, which was their monumental final single. The mismatch is just staggering. You've got this raw, unpolished, super niche sound of a Hollywood cowboy pitted directly against a refined, globally beloved pop anthem. It is literally a clash of two completely different worlds. And it was all for this. Number 1. The battle we're analyzing went down on March of 1970, and the prize was the absolute pinnacle, the top spot on the UK singles chart. As we all know, in the music industry, this specific chart statistic is everything. It dictates your cultural impact, your legacy, and of course, massive financial returns. When you're the Beatles releasing your final track, coming in at number 2 is effectively a loss. This wasn't just a fight for a respectable placement. Marvin's Wandering Star was moving an astonishing 100,000 copies a week at its peak. It created this intense zero-sum battle where only one track could hold that crown. Whenever you're analyzing a massive audience shift, you have to look closely at the disruptor. And Lee Marvin brought an entirely different, incredibly grounded energy to the marketplace. Think about it. The pop charts are usually defined by vocal acrobatics, high energy, and meticulously crafted melodies. But Marvin? He was gritty. He was weathered. His appeal definitely wasn't about being a teen idol or some musical prodigy. No, his appeal was his pure, cinematic authenticity. For any industry executive looking at the data back then, he was a total anomaly. A statistical outlier that literally no algorithm or trend forecaster could have ever predicted would resonate with a mainstream music buying audience. And his weapon of choice? A Western yodel. Yup. It acted like a wild card entrant that just swoops in and wins a highly anticipated championship game. In the context of global pop charts completely dominated by rock and roll and polished studio productions, a Western yodel was a massive disruption. It sent absolute shockwaves through the music industry. It proved to record labels that highly polished pop wasn't the only viable commercial product out there. Suddenly, listeners' ears were craving something radically stripped down, folksy, and honestly, almost jarringly out of place. It was the musical equivalent of showing up to a Formula One race in a vintage pickup truck and somehow taking the lead. Listeners reacted to this unusual upset not with confusion, but with overwhelming purchasing power. It proved that novelty and character can, for sure, outmuscle perfection. But against this wild card stood the absolute sure thing, the giant, Let It Be. If Lee Marvin was the unpredictable variable, the Beatles' masterpiece was the heavily favored, undisputed champion. It's a total triumph of songwriting, it carries this universal, deeply emotional message, and it was backed by the largest, most dedicated fan base in the history of recorded music. The pre-orders alone for this thing were monumental, and the intense global anticipation was practically deafening. For our executive brief, it's absolutely vital to understand this. Let It Be did not fail. It performed exactly as a massive, industry-dominating hit should. It was a juggernaut. But as we're seeing, even a juggernaut can be temporarily halted if something entirely unprecedented steps into its path. Because this was the final Beatles single. The stakes surrounding this release were truly astronomical. The Beatles were concluding a decade of unparalleled dominance, making this their swan song as an active band. The historical weight was just immense. The cultural expectation, the assumed reality for literally every record executive on the planet, was that this final track would effortlessly, instantly claim the #1 spot. It was viewed as a coronation, an inevitable victory lap. The fact that this massive historical momentum was disrupted makes the chart anomaly we're discussing not just surprising, but genuinely foundational for understanding market volatility. So, why did it happen? Why did the audience shift their preference toward Lee Marvin in that exact moment to make this such an unexpected hit? Well, because audiences aren't spreadsheets. Listeners reacted to the deep, resonant, almost weary honesty in Marvin's voice. They reacted to the pure contrast of it all. Sometimes when the market is completely saturated with perfection and monumental expectations, the audience just naturally gravitates toward the exact opposite. They pivot toward an anomaly. Wandering Star became an unexpected hit precisely because it didn't even try to be a pop song. It captured the public's imagination by breaking every single established rule of engagement. And the wording here is vital, blocking the top spot. The Beatles still achieved massive, massive success, but Let It Be actually debuted at #2 on the UK charts and was physically prevented from rising to the summit. Marvin held the line. He stayed locked at #1 for 3 incredible weeks in March of 1970. It's like a defensive lineman coming out of absolutely nowhere to stop the star quarterback just 1 inch from the touchdown. The chart statistics reflect this incredible standoff perfectly. Marvin's rugged, Western yodeling presence sat firmly at the top, completely immovable, while the immense historical weight of the Beatles crashed against him and ultimately had to settle for second place. It's literally one of the most remarkable defensive victories in chart history. So, what does this audience shift actually teach us about the unpredictability of market preferences? Well, I think it teaches us that no giant is truly invincible, and no formula is absolute. As executives, as creators, or even just as students of culture, we have to recognize that human preference is wild, it's spontaneous, and it's fiercely independent. An audience can unpredictably pivot toward an anomaly and completely reshape the charts in the blink of an eye. A rugged actor with a Western yodel can, under the exact right circumstances, conquer the greatest band in the world. Thank you for joining me for this explainer today. Keep questioning the trends, and never, ever underestimate the power of an unexpected wildcard.